14 years ago, I was at a Unitarian Universalist continuing education conference in Texas. The location was an Episcopal retreat center, 2 hours drive from Houston. It was a rural place surrounded by pastures with longhorn cattle. The retreat center was so remote that all the ministers had to leave the retreat center building at times to find a place where cell phones could receive a signal. Sometimes standing in the middle of long green fields, yards away from the conference center, talking loudly. One morning, some of us were chatting over breakfast about the best spots for cell phone reception and Wi-Fi reception at the retreat center. In some places, cell phone reception worked. In other places, one could receive a signal that permitted computer internet usage. One of my colleagues said, "The best place for a cell phone reception is on the hill from the building beneath the large cross next to the main building. Everything works at the foot of the cross." After a moment's pause, I replied, "One does not often hear those words from a Unitarian Universalist minister." It is not, though, at the foot of the cross that everything works, but beside the empty tomb as described in the passage from the gospel. The followers of Jesus and his family have experienced his humiliation and death. Despite signs and portents of things to come, they are surprised that he is not there and someone else is. They are surprised that he is alive again. Unitarian Universalists are often challenged on Easter Sunday to understand the resurrection story from the gospel. Many of the early Unitarian Christians also struggled with this, even as they accepted the story. They were no less rational than we are. Early Unitarian minister William Ellery Channing believed in the bodily resurrection of Jesus as a fact of history, with the additional factor that Jesus did not accomplish this, but rose through God's grace. Channing made a distinction between Jesus and God. Channing held that Jesus was human, but a focus for the Word of God in the world, reproducing God's message to us. Later, Unitarian Universalists and Universalists would struggle more powerfully with this resurrection story, with some discarding it from their belief systems, others perceiving the story as an archetypal saga with universal religious significance, as so many religions of the world speak of life from death in their mythology, in their sacred scriptures or thoughts. Something compelling remains from this resurrection story. Something happened in those ancient days. Whether it was true that Jesus was bodily resurrected, brought back to life, or his followers felt that his ministry became metaphorically alive again in their own souls, are questions that cannot be conclusively answered. It is known that the Spirit of Jesus persisted in the people he encountered. People who encountered Jesus were changed, even if the meeting only lasted a few minutes. He had the ability to see the better side of everyone and to revision the faith of ancient Israel, ancient Palestine, in a way that made it more relevant to human life. And now, at the empty tomb, his family and followers face the enormity of his death and the amazing reality of his new life. Though miracles abounded in the story before they looked into the tomb, they did not believe what they saw and heard. Some of them had already consigned Jesus to the list of martyrs who proclaimed themselves Messiah and attempted the liberation of Israel. On the first Easter, they are not ready for the resurrection. Nor are we. We're not ready for the resurrection. After all, to be resurrected implies that you have died, and none of us, regardless of our age and spiritual attainment, is completely ready for that, I imagine. But in many ways, we die and are brought back to life many times in our existence. This kind of death might not be a literal death, but death of the previous life. A part of us dies when someone we love dies. The loss of ability or identity, when a dream is denied, and the loss of money or status, and the loss of work, the breakup of an important relationship. In each of those cases, something in our spirit dies and we have to continue to live. I faced a feeling of death when I had to move back to my mother's house after college. My dreams of independent adulthood had to be scuttled for a while as I conformed to living under someone else's rules. There was probably nowhere in my imagination at the time that I would have preferred to live less than in my mother's home. Telling me that the unemployment rate for young people my own age at the time was well over 35% would not have offered any consolation, as it was my dream to live on my own. I would need to find a new life and start over again, rebuilding my sense of adulthood, away from dependency to independence. Sometimes our well-meaning friends and family will tell us that life will continue, but they miss the point. The life that we knew is ended. That life is over. A new life begins. As Reynolds Price writes, when we undergo huge traumas in middle life, everybody is in league with us to deny that the old life is ended. Everybody is trying to patch us up, to get us back to who we were, when in fact, what we need to be told is, you're dead. Who are you going to be tomorrow? You're dead. Who are you going to be tomorrow? It's the real question of resurrection under those circumstances. When creating a new life, a sorting has to occur from the old life. What endures? What is worthy or compelling to be taken forward? What from the old life needs to be surrendered for the new life? It seems that the things that are kept are those that provide beauty, meaning, and that will help in the new life. When human history is considered, it seems that those things that people took from one era to another fit into the criteria of beauty, meaning, and ability to aid the new life. That which is beautiful and meaningful endures, and we are willing to risk the future for those things and relationships that are needed to bring us to the new life. Similarly, in the old life, behind that which sustains the new life must be continued. You might have visited what is now called Bowden's Bakery on Fisherman's Wharf in San Francisco. It's, I imagine, the best place on earth to find sourdough bread. Above the bakery is a history museum to the bakery. And of course, I had to read every bit of it. It tells how Bowden's, or actually the French pronunciation is Boudin's, bakery survived and thrived despite the Great Fire of San Francisco in 1906. Louise Boudin, the baker, saw the fire coming down the street. She knew that she only had time to grab a few things and leave before the fire consumed her bakery and her home. She ran into the bakery, the operating place where she'd made the bread, grabbed a bucket, and threw the mother dough, her starter, into it, and ran down the street away from the fire. Louise Boudin knew that in the end, the only important thing for her future was that yeasty dough. And we can enjoy that yeast culture even now. It would enable her future. In the midst of whatever tragedies we experience, though, we must remember that a new life is possible. Whatever winter there is, spring and new life can be formed. It will not be like the past, but it will be life and joyous in its own way. The ancient Greeks and Romans believed that spring brought forth life when Persephone arose from the realm of the dead to be with her mother, Demeter. Essentially, the world's death in winter was the annual mourning of Demeter for her absent child in the underworld. The cycles of earth reflecting the tragic departure of her child and her child's return. Life comes from tragedy and loss, eternally rediscovered. The earth dies and lives again. Similarly, Unitarian Universalist minister Max Kreutz writes with gratitude about the cycle of death and life, resurrected. He writes, "I am amazed to the point of ecstasy at the miracle of awareness. Life brings me its freshness as an ineffable gift. Every moment renews my vision. Death is permission granted for other modes of life to exist, so that everything may be ceaselessly renewed. The plowshare of sorrow, breaking the heart, opens up new sources of life. The possible and future are one. The possible strives to come into being, and can be, if we help. Without sacrifice, there is no resurrection. Nothing grows, flowers, and bears fruit, save by giving. All that we try to save in ourselves wastes and perishes. All things ripen for the giving's sake, and in the giving are consummated." Unitarian Universalists often have difficulty with this notion of which Max Kreutz speaks, that people can embrace a new life, a resurrection of the spirit without sacrifice or giving. After all, who wants to surrender the past? Who but those who have no choice would let go of that which was loved? How much energy is expended trying to preserve the past that might be creatively channeled toward a different future? That is always the challenge in this life, to go on finding reasons and new ways to live after death and loss. It was no less true for those people who experienced the ministry of Jesus. They had to find hope from hopelessness, life from death. There's another kind of death that people can face. It is the death of the spirit that has been present with one for a long time. We can see that in Dickens' A Christmas Carol, when Scrooge moves from being spiritually dead, from greed that has overtaken his life, and finds life through connection and charity. That which held him was not really living. The ancient Greeks understood this, and they gave to Pluto, the god of the underworld, the realm of the dead, also the representation that Pluto was god of wealth. Perhaps they understood that pursuing wealth, as Scrooge did, was not about living in connection, but death. Death can take many forms, and it takes courage at times to recognize this truth and to admit that one is dead but wants to choose life. Those who endure substance addiction struggle to turn away from death to embrace life. And that journey can be frightening and also bear shame. When an addict attends her first Alcoholics Anonymous meeting and says, "My name is Mary, and I am an alcoholic," she embraces the possibility of moving from death to life. She moves to resurrection. The alcoholic might need to shed things that were comfortable and normal to embrace a new identity. That is also a frightening thought. Besides holding a graduate degree in ministry, I also hold a graduate degree in mental health counseling. In my internship for the counseling program, I met some addicts who had been told that another way of being was possible, but they were afraid. They were afraid to change. Some just could not believe that they could live fully without substances to which they were addicted. They knew that they were limiting themselves, but they had feared embracing a new life. Resurrection was frightening to people who had convinced themselves that addiction was their only path forward. Some of them knew they were empty inside and could not understand hope. Death comes to us, but so does love. And love is more powerful, more enduring. In this season, we know that we have the potential to live again, love again, act again. We celebrate the rebirth of the world. We acknowledge the signs that the earth, regardless of her hardships, still abounds with the wish to live once more, giving new life to generations, new hope to those who can imagine it. Almost 2,000 years ago, the followers of Jesus looked into the tomb and found it empty. They decided that whatever miracle did or did not occur, that they would take hope from the universalizing love that Jesus embodied. They decided that his way would live on in their hearts and in their actions. Through their love, at the very least, death did not win, but life was made anew. Like those before him and we who come after, they determined that which was worthy and that which needed to be left behind. They discerned what would truly die and what would live on. On this Easter morning, we look into the tomb, and we know that something good will come, even after death. We can affirm with E. Cummings to say yes for this amazing day, for the earth, for everything that is natural, that is infinite. We can affirm that the tomb is no place to stay for we who are alive again. For this faith, hope, and caring that keeps us alive, may we be truly grateful.